It is November 28th, 2023. My name is Zach Johnson. You know who I am, and I'm joined by Kristi Mast and Hannah Watson. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
And maybe you can just give me a little bit of, we've had you on the show before, Kristi. Who are you? What do you do? What are you about?
My name is Kristi Mast. I am the co-director of Student Life. I am all about discipleship, specifically women's discipleship and thriving in the kingdom.
But not men's discipleship.
You know, it's a secondary concern.
Hannah, who are you? What do you do? What are you about?
I am a student, a sophomore here at Sattler. I'm studying biblical and religious studies, and I'm also doing the education major through Indiana Wesleyan.
Double major.
That's me.
Yeah, that's Hannah. I think you're one of the first students to test that out. So we should invite you back on to talk about that experience sometime.
I'd love to share.
And I'm also joined in the room by Graham Weaver, but he's not on camera. But ladies, you can wave to Graham and say, "Hi, Graham."
Hi, Graham.
And we'll try to bring him in here a little bit. So today is a interesting version of the podcast because I'm trying to flip it where I want to talk and I want you to interview me, but it's going to be funny because I'm still going to be reading a few things here about something called entrustment.
Ooh.
Whoa, Graham, entrustment. So I thought I'd start off by just reading a newswire that our dear friend Clark Ray wrote out, and we're trying to get this in the news and tell our story a little bit here. And this podcast is just going to be part of that, telling the story of entrustment and trying to inject that into the DNA of the institution. Sound good?
That sounds awesome.
Any questions? All right. This is the title. Headline: Sattler College eliminates tuition with entrustment.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Eliminates?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
So when you look at our placeholder website, sattler.edu/entrustment, the top of the website, it says entrustment, and then we're still trying to figure out how to pronounce this. It says tuition with its strike through.
So tuition.
Right, tuition. And so I've been really pushing the marketing team that the name of this is not entrustment tuition because the two are oxymorons. One is entrustment is replacing tuition. It's not that I'm really actually trying to take the word tuition and wipe it off the institution's face and stomp on it.
Oh, wow.
To really eliminate it, at least for the next decade or under my presidency. Does that make sense?
I love that.
All right, so here we go. And then, so I'm gonna walk you through the basics of entrustment, and I'm still learning how to talk about this, but I understand it. And so I've been actually in the field socializing this idea as well. And so I talk about it, and then I have feedback. And I have some notes about some feedback people have given me. And I hope we can just talk about it and tell a story. Sound good?
That sounds awesome.
So here's the idea. Entrustment is basically where the college, rather than entering into a contractual relationship with a student where we say we charge you tuition in order to receive your education, we enter into more of a relationship with a student. Some would say a covenant, like Hope College in Michigan, but we're avoiding the word covenant because it's a little strong, and there are severe ramifications to covenant breaking biblically that our board was like, you should probably not use that word. So we didn't use the word covenant, but that is the dichotomy, like contract versus relationship. So instead of tuition, we're saying, hey, if you get accepted and you commit to what we want from our students, and that's basically like dedicate yourself to academics and be hungry for discipleship and service. So if you meet those two criteria, you're willing to work hard and you want to really commit yourself to God and his kingdom, we won't charge you tuition, but we'll entrust you to make two basic commitments. One is a commitment to kingdom service. This is a nebulous commitment at this point. I've heard feedback. What is kingdom service? And it's basically a lot of different things. It can be from homeschooling mothers to stay-at-home moms to doctors to businessmen to computer scientists. So it's a broad scope, but it's very directed, intentional decision making with what you want to do with your life. So that's one, a commitment to kingdom service. And the second is a commitment to financial gratitude. And so this is kind of a unique way of saying, hey, in order for the college to actually be around in 30 years, we need our alumni to actually give back to the college. We're saying give what you can when you can to make the opportunity available for future students. And so rather than billing that to students, we're saying, hey, give back what you can when you can. Another way of saying it is pay it forward, except the word pay, we've thought about this very intentionally. There's no legal obligation. So it really is a gift.
Wow.
Give it forward when you can, what you can, because the college can't legally come after anyone that's like, I don't really want to do that. So those are the two principles. Do you want me to keep going? Any questions?
So what do students actually sign up for? Like, what are they actually committing to with the entrustment model? You said it's not legal. It's not a covenant.
I call it an agreement, a student agreement. So all of our students sign an agreement to be part of the college. This is not a crazy agreement that basically says we'll abide by your community policies. So we have things in our student agreement. You've seen it, Kristi, because you are the co-director of student life. It's like, don't bring alcohol on campus, don't do drugs, like a lot of the basics like agreements. But this is basically saying, hey, by taking this entrustment offer, you agree that you're generally in line with serving the kingdom, and generally you're willing to give back what you can when you can, and you're willing to sort of sign your name on a line that says, I'll try to do this. It's kind of hard because we're not trying to handcuff people, but we're also trying to communicate, we really need you to follow through on this. It's not like, and so it's not like we're binding you to this, but we also really need you for us to make it in the future. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And our dream is actually that over time, our alumni, this will be like an annual thing where our alumni can get together and be like, hey, remember that time we spent with each other that one time in Boston? Oh, and remember that we all agreed to honor with financial gratitude or generosity. Let's remind ourselves of that and give back. And I've talked to the president of Hope College. So Hope College calls this Hope Forward. You should look it up. They got Malcolm Gladwell to come and interview about them. And we're doing something very similar, but they're hoping that their alumni engagement is way stronger than your average institution, because we're praying that people are doing this out of like joy and like, I want to do this because I had such a good experience. So it'll actually help us create a great program so that we delight our students, so to speak, and that hopefully a lot of our students will actually be much more tethered in a good way back to the institution.
Yeah. And just as you're describing that, especially the idea of alumni engagement, there's the two principles, right? Kingdom service and financial gratitude.
Right.
And how I'm just thinking about how exciting that is to think of coming back together with your classmates every year, every 5 years, whatever the interval is, and talking about not only the financial gratitude piece, but also the kingdom service. Like, what are you doing with your life right now? And I don't know, I'm just picturing this like moment of fresh inspiration and kind of adrenaline pumped into your veins of seeing these people that you had this really formative experience with, and the ways that they're pouring out their lives for the kingdom.
Right. And hopefully some people are doing it together.
Yeah.
That's the dream. It's like, this is a networking opportunity, make connections, go do really meaningful things together.
Yeah. When I first hear it, I just think like, I'm so honored and valued by the idea that people want to invest in me, and they like think that I'm valuable enough.
It's true. We do want to invest in you.
Yeah, that I'm valuable enough that you want to like pour resources into me, like without any expectations attached necessarily, outside of like doing my best and being committed to like striving hard at school and then wanting to serve later. And it just like actually makes me want to give back more when I hear that. I just am like, wow, I love this. I love that I'm being invested in, and then I want to give it back. So it totally is inspiring that in me just to hear it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go on a little bit more of a rant, and then you can pester me with questions. Sound good?
That sounds awesome. Great.
So when you look at our website, one of the things that the first headline is, it says dedication, not debt. That we're when when I talk about this, a lot of people are actually like, they boil it down. They're like, what I'm hearing you say is it's free tuition. It's free, FREE. And I actually have started slapping people's wrists very gently on my staff and at campus when they use the word free, because I'm trying to get at this point that, hey, actually in the background, there are people breaking their backs to make this happen. And it's not, there's no free lunch, right? This whole idea that it's not just a cakewalk. And so people have been saying, like, oh, how are you going to filter students who get this opportunity? Because this is for every single accepted student. It's not like we're delineating between one or the other. And I've just been saying that Sattler's program in general requires some levels of dedication. True or false?
High levels of dedication.
True.
Graham, true or false? Yeah, when we do surveys of our student, the one word that gets used the most is rigorous. It's so rigorous. I said, why don't we just call it tear-jerking academics? No, I'm just kidding.
Soul crushing.
But we are looking for students who are dedicated.
Yeah.
And not that a variety of people aren't worthy of investment, but our program itself is sort of a filter. So when I give a tour of Sattler, we had Dr. Schumann on. We're the only college in the country where Greek and Hebrew are still part of the core curriculum, even if you're a biology student, computer science, business, which is different. So we're hoping that dedication piece is almost a self-filter for who comes into it. And so that's been one question that people have raised is like, how are you not just going to give this away to somebody who just kind of wants a degree? Does that make sense that our acceptance we're not changing our acceptance requirements or admissions requirements. We're keeping it there, but we're still asking our students to dedicate themselves. And I'm praying that not only will we get students, but it will enable better dedication.
Absolutely.
Where like maybe people won't be thinking about paying tuition and they'll be thinking about, hey, how do I learn more here?
Yeah.
Not that having a job, part-time study isn't a good time, but we're trying to sort of relieve that burden from students. Make sense? Dedication, not debt.
Yeah.
Totally. And Hannah, you've done this actually. You've worked in order to be able to pay your tuition. I would love to, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I went to school before coming to Sattler at just a community college, and I worked like 35 or 40 hours a week. And I would just like pick up random jobs. Like I worked like super early in the morning for a couple hours and then would run to classes and cram in a couple classes and then sprint off to work again in the afternoon and then do school all evening. And it was like very stressful. And I also just felt like I couldn't really engage well with the academics because there was just something else on my mind all the time. Like I had to be able to pay for this somehow. And so just knowing that there's like the freedom to actually dig deep into classes and not have that financial burden is a big, big deal. Big deal.
Okay. And then I'll just chime in with my own experience. I went to a service academy where I got paid to go to school. So I was one-upped. I'm one-upping all of you. But there is this actually idea that some people are like, you couldn't pay me enough to go through that experience because it was super intense. You were up at 5 a.m. a lot, marching to breakfast in the snow. And some people are like, I don't want that. That's not exactly what we're trying to get at with our students, but it's somewhere in that spectrum of, hey, we're asking you to take on much more of a load than your average student. So we're asking for dedication, but we don't want to put you in debt for it. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
A lot of sense.
Good. And then let's keep going down here. The other thing I wanted to talk about is our international students. All right. We'll think about this. I haven't written this down, but I'm hoping it makes its way into our next line of thinking. At any given point in time, I want Sattler to be able to say we have students from every continent. Australia is a stretch. I'm working on it. Still no. Anyone knows anyone from Australia interested? And South America is actually the next. Hoping to go recruit down there. We have can you list the countries our students are from currently in this last round, just across the student body?
Uganda, Kenya, U.S., Canada. Do we have other places?
India, Ukraine, Mexico, Canada.
All over the place.
So we have Zimbabwe. So we have a really unique goal here that when you look at education, one of the things that people say about a college degree is they say it's a great equalizer, that you can take somebody from Zimbabwe or Kenya or Uganda, India, someone from Rochester, Minnesota, someone from Hutchinson, Kansas, someone from Canada, Ontario. Waterloo, Ontario, I was right. Okay. And that the college experience equalizes you-ish and then provides you with similar opportunities. And so one of the not critiques, or just pesterings that I've received in the field is, will there be some sort of mental, or I'll call it a social debt that a student takes on by accepting this when they leave, when they're like, I am going to take a job that I'm not going to make any money and I won't be able to pay it back. Is that okay? When I make the joke, I hope some students do that, but I also hope somebody becomes a billionaire, just gets back a ton of money over time because they believe in what's happening here. So I'm trying to basically say that it's okay for different sets of outcomes on the back end without a copious amount of social debt that's attached to, I actually can't give back. And some people have been just thinking about that. Even some alumni have been saying, I'm not really sure I want this lifetime commitment back. And so maybe we can just torture out how to think through this. Some students, I just got off a phone call with a prospective student who said, my parents gave me money to go to college. Can I just pay it all up front and be done with it? And just not even have to think about it. I was like, sure, why not? But why not wait and sort of go through it? We're not asking you of that. So help me think about like this equalizing effect that this will have during the college career, the college years, plus how we as an institution are sort of giving people permission not to take on purely lucrative careers, and how to more equalize and be okay with students that go out having different life paths. Does that make sense? Help me think about it and how to communicate it.
I think for me, the kingdom service part is what is so key here. And I know, like, when you hear that, you probably think Bible translator, missionary, that kind of thing. But I think the way that I understand that is so much broader than that. And I think if we truly believe that Christ's kingdom is made up of the church and of his people everywhere, then the businessman who is not practicing extractive business practices, but actually productive in and is doing business in a way that is advancing the kingdom by impacting people's lives and also making a lot of money and being able to give back, that's enabling his classmate who is going to deepest, darkest Africa to, translate the Bible into a language that it's never been in before. And I think part of this is that we're so used to thinking very individualistically in kind of the Western mentality, but I don't think that's the way that the gospel teaches us to think, but it teaches us to think much, much more broadly and that we're all more connected. I don't know if that gets at what your question is.
I think it's more, it's more of how do you approach the students in a way that they don't have a social debt to actually take on a job where they feel indebted to pay back financially, and really trying to hammer in this idea like it's a paradox, because I'm saying I don't want you to make a decision to make a lot of money after. If you want to go be a missionary in a third world country like India, i.e. we have students doing that, that's good. We want you to do that. However, it's also okay if you go and take on your family's business and maybe generate more revenue. I'm just going to say like financial revenue. And like really having the conversations with students, like we like both of those, but we still will need some people to contribute back over time. And so it's kind of there's a paradox here. Somebody on staff brought up the point, and they're like, in theory, it's a great idea, but what if all your alumni just pull off the Hudson Taylor move? And they're like, I'm not even going to make a salary. I'm going to live on prayer. And will we be able to sustain the institution if every single alumni can't give back $1? And I was like, unlikely that will happen, but we'll still make it happen. So help me think about that. I'm just ranting. Yeah.
I think one thing that you brought up earlier is like you're dealing with a diverse group of students here who have like a plethora of interests. And so you're going to have people who are like genuinely interested in the family business for like the sake of doing business. They love that. That gives them life. And then you're going to have people who are really, really excited about going to Uganda because that gives them life. And that's like what Lord has called them to. So I think like as you approach and each student who comes through the doors as like a unique individual where their interests are valued and like encouraged and supported, you're going to get people who are going to pursue all sorts of different things because we're different, unique individuals, you know?
Got it.
Yeah, I think this makes so much sense to me when I think about it from the perspective of the kingdom and then second from the perspective of finances. Because if you truly believe you're not your own person, but that at the same time God has uniquely given you things to do in the world, I think both of those perspectives, and it's not like you're not your own person, you're Sattler College's person. It's like you belong to the kingdom of God. And so my father, for example, is an incredible businessman. He's made a lot of money across the course of his life, and he's been incredibly generous with that. And his legacy is, you know, schools in India, and a dear friend of his, I don't know if he's ever worked a traditional job. He's been a full-time pastor, missionary, church planter. And he's able to do that because of my father exercising his gifts to the fullest. My dad would not make a great church planter person like out there on the frontier. But his friend Sam is just incredible with that work. And they've almost like partnered together to make the kingdom come in India in a way that my dad could have never done on his own and Sam could have never done on his own. And I think that perspective of everybody exercising their gifts to their fullest is what makes this vision work for me.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get at this idea that when I talk about Sattler, often there's like you're a Bible college. Like that's basically what you're doing. I talk about like the biblical core and people are like, oh, Bible college. And I'm trying really hard to say like, I understand why that's the perspective because in general, what's happened is there's sort of this distinction between Christian and professional Christian. And like the professional Christians would be the type of people who take Greek and Hebrew and church history, and it's sort of the load is on their shoulders to go to seminary, be pastors. I think that's not always the case, but in some worlds there's that distinction. But we're trying to like kind of tilt that horizontally and say, hey, everybody is bivocational. Like every student should have this skill set and
areas.
It's okay that, and then so when I'm pitching this to like businesses, I'm trying to say like, hey, we'll talk about this later, but I'm trying to say, what if you sponsored a student through the college and help them pay for room and board? This is a side conversation, and they come and work for you afterwards. And like people are starting to think about, oh, this is an amazing opportunity. And I'm trying in the future to get even more investment in these young years and like a mobilization so that people are like, wow, I feel like people are investing in me. I can take everything on. But does it make sense that in general, like it's open to a wide swath of students? And there's these two principles of service and gratitude, but then afterwards, we're not like policing what people are going to do afterwards. And so we expect doctors, we expect missionaries, we expect teachers, computer scientists, right? Makes sense?
Yeah. And if we trust the education and the discipleship enough, then, I mean, we're trusting both our students and our process, right? That we will equip excellent computer scientists who are able to go out there and be really successful, excellent businessmen who are going to be able to go out there and be really successful, but also who are not only going to be great professionals, but they're going to be truly bivocational disciples who also are great citizens of the kingdom and whose lives are oriented around that. And it's kind of I feel like this is a vote of confidence not only in our students, but also in the whole Sattler experience that we're we're trying so hard. That's our whole goal, is to help people become these bivocational people.
Yeah.
And I feel like this model is another vote of confidence in that direction and kind of commitment to that bivocational students and graduates.
Great. Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about the strings attached, which are none. So basically, I think people are like, oh, what's the catch for what strings are attached? And one, I just want to be upfront right now, students are still paying for room and board unless you're married or like over the age of 30, I think is the policy. Mm-hmm. So we charge students about $980 a month right now per month. I think we charge them for 10 months. So that's $9,800. And they live down in Back Bay. That's a string. It's not a completely cost-free environment yet. So for string, any questions about that? That sounds high if you don't live in Boston. I promise you it's a good deal. Sattler still subsidizes the cost to live downtown for a lot, and we're hoping to not lose money on our room and board someday, but we still do. So string number one is room and board. We're still not giving that out, or not giving, granting that out. String number two, you have to be enrolled in an undergraduate or certificate program at the college. Makes sense.
Seems fair.
And then an interesting string is that we don't have strings to anybody else, especially the government. It's kind of interesting, right? So
that is interesting.
I think I'll talk about this. I was just at a conference for accreditation. I won't name any names, but I don't know if people want me talking about them. We're one of the only accredited Christian colleges that takes zero federal funds, even the Pell Grant. And so some people are like, you're crazy, that's free money. And I still waver on that, and we'll probably evaluate that decision. So, and I was also at a meeting with the state of Massachusetts with the governor, and they invited a bigwig from Washington to talk about how the government and education are linked sort of intrinsically. And there's a big threat right now to institutions locally. It's because a case went to the Supreme Court about should colleges be able to use race in admissions, and it went to the Supreme Court, and it got overturned, and so now colleges can't use a certain standard. And so there's a bunch of people like, oh, we gotta really make sure that the government and education is like linked, and we're providing all these mechanisms. My theory is like, more than ever, we need to be, especially as a Christian community, doubling down on making sure that we have institutions that don't rely on federal funding, because the word that I always, the phrase is, if you take someone's shekels, you take their shackles. And that's like that's not like, I'm not trying to like point fingers at any other institutions that like, oh, you're shackled to the government, because I think that they're not necessarily. But we're doing this all funded by private giving, private donations, and none of it comes from the government. And so I think that's really important to talk about, that we are doing this on our own. We have accreditation requirements. We get audited often, and people look at our finances, make sure we're okay. So we still have to abide by a set of standards, but that's exciting too.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on those strings or non-strings?
I think what's also exciting, especially about the last item about shekels and shackles, right? The institution is entrusting themselves to students, to alumni, to graduates.
Right.
And that's, I think, also a powerful step of trust in our students and in our alumni and our graduates, that we're not depending on, that we're depending on you to keep the college moving forward. And that's just really exciting to me, to give that power and that authority to our graduates.
Yeah, I think there's like this idea of like this big diffusion of responsibility when you have like big linkages with people that can provide resources, and it's like, oh, that's their job, not my job. And hearing that, no, actually, once I leave Sattler, like there's a need here that I can give and support. Like that's something I want to be a part of, because I love Sattler,
right,
and I want to support that.
So I wanted to just talk a little bit more about funding because people have questions. How does Sattler fund this initiative? So let's think about this. I recently interviewed another institution I was very inspired by this institution. I'm not going to name its name. And in order to switch their whole campus over to this pay it forward model, I'll use that as a placeholder, they need to raise $1 billion endowment.
Wow.
Because of how reliant institutions of higher ed have been on tuition revenue. And so we're at a point in our journey. It's 2023. We were approved in 2016. First class showed up 2018. We're 5 years in. And so when we were looking at the numbers, we could basically say, we could do this next year if we play our cards right and flip everybody onto this like overnight. And that's really important to me, that every single person gets invited into this. And the way that we are doing it, I just thought I'd tell you about it because it's also important to me. Our revenue or our contributions come primarily from a company it's very profitable, but they follow a non-accumulation profit model where their profits are sent to something called a donor advised fund. And then that donor advised fund, it's a Christian donor advised fund, then examines a series of nonprofits that money that gets distributed to. And so we actually have an irrevocable pledge from a company to fund us and make this possible. And a lot of people, what I want to talk about is that some people think that I'm going to try to be a little bit nebulous here without naming names because I don't want to get into names, that think that there's somebody who says, I get to fund the Sattler or I don't, and they make that decision sort of 4 times a year. It's actually a legally binding gift. It's called an irrevocable pledge, and so it's actually as good as if not better than tuition in my mind. And so that's how we're funding it, and it's sort of through the efforts of a lot of people. Yet the people who get to decide where the profits go, that's obviously made possible through our founding team. And I think it's an incredible opportunity. Any questions about that funding mechanism and how we're making it happen?
Yeah. You said it's better than tuition. I think I'm missing the connection as far as is more reliable than tuition.
So I got on the call with a college president, a Massachusetts college president, and I was basically explaining our situation and how I can begin to give people confidence in our sustainability. And I explained this pledge, and he's like, that's really better than a lot of colleges have when they rely on, can students make the payments on a regular basis? Can they not? Will they withdraw? And so we are not reliant on tuition, never have been. And so we're very sustained by a very committed structure. And we actually, in a weird way, it's good and bad because we've been able to weather the storm of we don't have 80 students to pay tuition to cover all our costs. And so in my mind, it's more resilient than tuition. However, it's a consolidated source. And so there are pros and cons of what happens if World War III, there's all these scenarios that are is this sustainable? And so I'm going to talk about sustaining it in the future, but I just wanted to talk about how we make it possible in the present. Any questions about that?
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so another important thing to know is we are approved by accreditors and the state of Massachusetts to operate. And I don't think a lot of people understand how much work goes into being approved by those regulating authorities.
Yeah.
And so I often like to say hey, every year I sit down with some intense people, two sets of people, we're actually adding a third here sometime in the third, and they look at our books and our audits and they're like, are we sustainable? And they're like, oh yeah, sustainable. So I like to give people a vote of confidence in that. And so for the future, I do have more goals that up to this point, I think we've had 25 individuals who have contributed to the college over its lifetime. My goal is that Entrustment is actually going to really increase the the quantity of contributors. So I think every student I want to be contributing. So Entrustment, it's like give what you can when you can. I want every staff member to be contributing and every board member to be contributing. And so we're really trying to say, hey, this is sort of I'm going to use crowdsourced. It's a little bit of a dirty term, but this is really going to be sourced through the whole community as opposed to, so in the future, I'm hoping to grow that quantity. And I think if we have a good product, that it's going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. It's like the proof, the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Right.
And if I know, as a Sattler grad, my experience here was phenomenal. And if I know that Sattler wants and is asking for my investment, then it's really powerful to be able to give back and pay it forward.
Right. The other thing I want to talk about is, in our language when we announce this, the thing that threatens Sattler most, it's actually ironic, it's finding the right students to fit the institution. When I explain what Sattler has happened here, we're one of the only institutions that didn't grow out of our backyard. So a lot of colleges, they start and then they recruit locally and then eventually they expand. There's a few exceptions to that. We have I think only one homegrown Massachusetts student. Is that right? There might be a couple students here or there who families live here now, and so last year I like to talk to people that my year last year was really deciding to be a non-affiliated Christian school that doesn't affiliate with any single church. And so when we're non-denominational, I like to use the word interdenominational now. I've read it in an article. I'm like, I like that a little bit better than non-denominational, because there's a set of doctrines that bind the people together that would come here. But how do we find the right people to come here? Grant, sorry, I'm asking what we ask everybody. It's like, how do we recruit the right students to this? And I did want to just kind of communicate on the podcast that when you look at our board, we have sort of a conservative Anabaptist constituency that's very obvious throughout the institution. And then we have a parallel set of people that align really well with some of what the early Anabaptists taught, like the church I attends would be in this group of, it's called Followers of the Way. It's like parallel, but not the same, and can collaborate well. And then we have this new branch of people that I'm really trying to go after. That's like, hey, I want to find students who hold the Bible in a high esteem and we're willing to sort of engage more broadly, a little bit more broadly, without going too broad in terms of students we're recruiting here. Does that make sense? That there's generally, we're not trying to just serve one constituency. We're trying to open this up to more people. Any questions there? It is a big question. I just want to make sure that people understand we're trying to grow the diversity of our institution a little bit more than we've traditionally seen. Any questions? So it's open to more students is what I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah. Do you have any more descriptors for that kind of like third group that's broader? Like who are the students? Who are the people that you're looking for there?
Yeah, it's really hard to write it down. I would say it's the kind of student that kind of has a radical approach to Christianity, and it's like, yeah, I'll go learn Greek and Hebrew. Oh, and like if I see a woman wearing a dress and a head covering, I won't run away in the opposite direction. It's the kind of person that likes to entertain some ideas they might have heard about like, what does it mean to love your enemies? Christians in politics, maybe the kingdom wasn't born to be in the left or the right. Maybe it's supposed to be something different. So it's someone that's sort of willing to entertain these ideas, but not necessarily committed to them before they show up. It's not like, so that's another thing. We don't enforce church requirements or standards. We don't do any of that here at the college. And so it's more of like an openness to ideas and the high esteem for the Bible. And then I would even chime in, like, the Bible as not being like a topic of latter-day revelation, that like we should be progressing with society and culture. It's more of like this fight for original truth of, hey, the truth is unkillable. It was handed down by Jesus, and that's basically the set of people. But I would even say that like a lot of our faculty fit that category of people. So that's, if you can think about our faculty, a lot of our faculty members kind of looking at that type of person. Go look at who teaches here, and that should give you a good a glimpse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we talked about this a few episodes ago when I was on the podcast before, that this isn't like a place that we are trying to like punch out these molds of indoctrinate students, right? Like we do want this to be, it's obvious that you look at our founding precepts, they're unique among the broader kind of evangelical world. So there's going to be unique flavor and unique twist. But it's not like we're looking to have cookie cutter graduates that all line up exactly to this exact standard.
That word's kind of a dirty word, indoctrination, but it's actually it's actually kind of what Christ is calling us to do. So you don't want to like step away from it too much, because there are lines that we're like, there are black and whites that we stand for. Sure. Not that, but that's exactly right, Kristi, that we don't have to like agree to all these things to be a student here, but you kind of have to like be like, oh, I want to learn more and be in an environment that challenges me and things like that. Makes sense. Hannah, that makes sense?
Yeah,
Graham,
absolutely.
Makes sense? All right. The next thing I want to talk about is a little bit of a story. And when I announced this to the student body, I said this was phase 1. And I want to talk a little bit about phase 2 and some of the things I'm dreaming about for the future, just as I pitched this to you. This is more like a dream, not a promise. So this next conversation is non-binding, non-promising. Can you give all the
disclaimers?
Just give all the disclaimers. No. So originally last year in February, the board came up with a proposal that there were basically going to be 3 tracks through the college. One was going to be your traditional free agent student. You pay, you get the degree, you leave, we give you financial aid, blah, 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 blah. Nice, like very traditional. The second was going to be called what we were going to be calling like oh man, I can't even remember the word for it because there wasn't a good word. It was like a bound to your home church through the college. You're not a free agent. You have a commitment to somebody who's like blessing you to come, and you return there. And there's like there's sort of an agreement between you and a home community that you're not just like leaving what you came from, and you're like still interconnected. Does that make sense? What's a good word for that? It's like sent.
Yeah, missioning.
Yeah.
Sent. So, and then the third track was what was called a service track, where we basically said this track is going to be for a group of students who make some sort of agreement with like an organization or a church or a business or a nonprofit, and they'll actually fund your tuition in exchange for some sort of commitment on the tail end after you graduate. And so basically this year, the board tried to just simplify it and say, all right, let's just start by entrustment will be the baseline. And then phase 2 is where I'm approaching people and saying, all right, hey, what if you were to approach a business, a church, a mission, or I approach them? I know it's hard to level this purely on the students, and the college will fund the cost of tuition. What if like a group funds the cost of room and board, and that the student gets this whole package deal where they're maybe not paying $1 out of their own pocket, but then they commit to something more specific on the back end, a little bit more concrete about like, hey, I want to go work at this business for 4 years, or I want to go be a doctor. Tell me your reaction to this whole, like, it could be like an 8-year commitment, which is kind of scary. It could be, you could negotiate it a little bit differently, but some students have made agreements to go teach at different schools coming through, and I'm like, man, I want more of that to happen because I think it's a good deal. Any reactions to that idea?
It's countercultural, but then it also flows with the culture, because people make 8-year commitments all the time when they decide that they're going to be a doctor or all these other kind of rigorous career paths. It's cultural in the fact that we're not used to making big commitments like that, or long. Those commitments can feel really long. But I also think that so many young people are trying to figure out what in the world to do with their lives, and this could be really, really freeing to say, I am going to decide now, and I'm going to commit to doing really good work,
Right.
For business, for a school, for an organization, and I get excited about that idea, especially that if students have the option to do something like that, that's huge, both for organizations and for individuals.
Yeah, for me, the idea of being able to be connected with something that is going to like align with what I want to do anyway is really exciting. So if there could be a connection with, like, I want to teach. So if there could be a connection with, like, yeah, you could go teach at this school and they'll fund your room and board, whatever. That is really exciting because it's really facilitating the thing I would have to do anyway and giving me a jump start even on that opportunity. That's really, really exciting.
Right. My wife she's probably annoyed at me because I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll be like, I've got an idea. So my parents were missionaries and self-supported missionaries. And there's actually another idea that students, you could imagine raising support to pay the cost of room and board. It's not that crazy of a cost. If it 9,800 times 4, that's a little under $40K. That's feasible to raise for a student in like 4 years if you didn't want to work, and that you said, hey, in exchange for this, I'll do X, Y, Z. So I just think it's possible to even like hone in on this even more. And one of my passions is that more young people will be mobilized in their best years to be doing very formative work that will stick with them forever. And hopefully they'll like latch onto it. I always think about other systems in the world. You look at the military, they're investing in 18-year-olds, and they're pouring so much money into them, so much time, so much training. And then people are like, oh, it makes sense because our nation's security depends on this. And that's kind of where I'm trying really as an institution to start thinking about this a little differently, where it's like, hey, Christians who care about the commission and our role, let's like invest in these years a ton more than we currently are and expect that there'll be like a bunch of good things that come afterwards. Does that make sense? And there's some churches out there, I like to talk about the Mormon church, and it's like I think they're phenomenal, and their mobilization and their reach on the planet. Anyway, I was inspired myself by the Mormon church and their 2-year service requirements for a lot of their young people. And I was like, man, they're taking over the world. We gotta jump in there. Anything I missed? I think we hit a lot of the big things. Entrustment. Sattler College eliminates tuition with entrustment.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I would love to hear a little bit more about like why now and why Sattler. Like, why does this fit specifically with Sattler's mission, and why in this specific moment in time is this compelling?
For me, well, so why now and why Sattler? So I've been having this idea when I look at charging people money for character formation, it's very counterintuitive to me. Because I think a little of this comes out of my own DNA, where I told the story when my parents were still in Ecuador, my middle sister got accepted into a very expensive private Christian school in Texas. I won't even name the name. And they sent the bills down to us, and we lived on like $0. My parents went into debt to pay for my sister to go. So I was a freshman when that was happening. And so I noted to myself, I was like, I will never ask my parents for a dime to go to college. I just said I won't do it. Just because I saw the sort of the back end of like what high tuition does. So for me, it's a very personal thing. And so I spent like a ton of my time trying to figure out what's an opportunity where I can sort of pave my own path. So I chose the military, which so that's my own sort of like, hey, Christian formation shouldn't be something, shouldn't necessarily have this bill attached to it. This should be something that the church is like, hey, this is great. And so for me, when I think about Sattler and me and like I took around a role as president in August of 2022, I've been dreaming about this the whole time I've been here, that I really want to like drive that cost even lower and lower. So Sattler's original 3 C's are core curriculum, which corresponds to a problem. Core curriculum, Christian character formation, and cost. And so when I think of that C, I'm like, man, I want to paint that with a bullseye and just like go at it. And so for me, it's like, this is a great step to really say, hey, we really take this seriously. I even think that there's this line from Bonhoeffer that I think about. I think you've heard it, where in World War II, Bonhoeffer was like looking at all the Nazis and how impressive they were. And so he took his friend to a hill, and they were like looking at a Nazi base, and you can imagine like, whoa, it's impressive, all the discipline, organization, mobilization. He says the Christian church needs to be better than that. He's like pointing down. And I just generally think that that's true, that we need to be building these things that invest in people that accomplish big goals. And so Sattler's a microcosm of that, because I'm hoping we can get to 300 students in like 10 years, but 300 students is very small. That's like 75 a year. And so this can't be for everyone, but hopefully we're leading the charge to invest in a set of like spectacular young people. And so that's part of it for me. And then as an institution, and even in the world, this is like even broader. I'd like to start thinking a little bit more about, hey, a lot of us can name all the things that are wrong with the world. I mean, you could probably name some things wrong with the world, right? There's Israel-Hamas right now. There's almost a genocide in Sudan. Our own turf politically is like kind of insane. And so I like the institution to say, hey, what's right with Christ? It's like, what's wrong with the world? Or we can look at that and say, what's right with Christ? Let's focus in on that, and let's develop people based on these things, and then trust that they'll know how to deal with these problems downstream. Does that make sense? I know it's a big question, but why now is because we can.
Yeah.
We looked at it, we were inspired, and we're like, we can do this. And not only can we do it, I think we can beat some of the other institutions who are bigger and larger, and we're more nimble. So I'm like, now's the right time. I also want to grow the institution. So I want to be an institution that attracts excellent students that are like really looking to make an impact on the world. And then Boston's also a really interesting place where I think about, we chose to be in Boston because we think that big cultural things happen here. We know they do. And so people are like, why'd you choose Boston? It's crazy. It's like, it's one of the more blue, I'll just use the word blue cities in the country. And they're like, why are you doing this? It's expensive. And so I'm really trying to make it possible with this decision. I also care about students. When I talk to students, usually when I was recruiting, it was like, I'd love to come there, but, and finances usually become part of that conversation. Oh, it sounds awesome, but this.
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing for me, is like, I hate that. I'm like, oh man, I want to make sure to do everything I can to help solve that. And then on the even further, there's this question where when you talk to like a freshman entering college, they usually say something like, I want to do this. They're like an 18-year-old. If you would have asked me, it would have been like, I want to do disaster relief, with like my dad did. And then something happens where you're billed tuition, and then you're like, maybe I should just get a job and pay my bills.
Yeah.
And I really want to eliminate that as much as possible, that shift away from what people want to do versus what they end up doing. And so I hope that Sattler can be a stepping stone for students into doing what they want to do. And I'm hoping that communities can rally and be like, man, we have every student get a mentor, So I want Sattler to be celebrated by different communities where our students are from and things like that. And I think this is a step in that direction where we're saying, hey, we want you, we invite you to invest in students with us. We want your partnership and things like that.
Entrustment just, I think, makes more and more sense to me, the term, because there's trust on so many levels. And it's investment into students, and it's trusting that their God-given desires, their God-given passions are better than us telling them what to do. And that truly, like, investing and making those bloom and grow and be to send them out into the world to do those things that God has given them to do. That's a big step of trust on the college's part. That, and it's kind of like a big step of trust in the Holy Spirit that's in them, that's urging them on to do all those things. And that gets me really excited.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's an incredible life-giving opportunity to be told, like, we're going to equip and empower you to go and serve Jesus without this big bill on your back.
Yeah, and it's only going to get better. I'm just kidding. But we went a little bit over, but I'm going to start wrapping us up here. Anything else? Any other comments, questions, things, topics that we should cover before? No? All right. So how can you help? No. So obviously we're looking at, when I go around talking to people, I'm always like, what do you do? Yeah, it's actually it's like, I look for students, I look for people, I look for money, and I look for partners is basically the 4 categories. It's very simple, but to support Entrustment, we've actually expanded how people can support this into the college. And so you can give to the college, and we're looking to grow an endowment to make this a little bit more resilient. So you can go to sattler.edu/give, and we have 3. You can support Entrustment endowment, which will basically like be a fund that we grow over time to make sure that this grows. It's kind of like building up a pool of money to weather different storms. You can support international living grants. That's something I'm very passionate about right now, because we want to continue to make it an opportunity for international students to come and have the same opportunity. And we need to actually raise money for that. Or you can just trust me and give to the general fund, and I'll make decisions about where your dollar goes. It'll be a dollar well spent. I heard that people don't know we have a store. Is that right?
Yeah. I had no idea.
My sweater,
Half zip is really appealing to me.
I didn't even know my sweater came from the store.
So I'm just saying, sattler.edu, top line, there's a button called store. You click it and boom, there it is.
I will say this is one of the softest sweaters that I own.
Yeah.
It's a nice sweater. It is really good.
So if you're looking into some Sattler merch, there's the one I'm wearing right there. Looks good, right?
Yeah.
Graham, maybe I should get you one for the next podcast. Do you like it? I like that. Navy.
I actually have it on my Christmas wish list.
Wow.
Great. And then I'd also like to say students can apply to one of the 49 openings. So we can't take 1 million students. Fall 2024, we're launching this fall 2024 at apply.sattler.edu. Thank you, Kristi, for joining. Thank you, Hannah, for joining. Graham, thank you as well. And that's a wrap. Sattler College eliminates tuition with Entrustment.
Woo! Woohoo!